Yes, you've been lied to. I understand that there's so many different voices and opinions out there about the lawsuit and about the current settlement offer. There's all these random ideas without factual or sometimes even reasonable basis, like how this is going to change real estate forever, or how it's going to affect home prices and they're going to be cheaper. I mean, even President Joe Biden, which I'm pretty sure he either misunderstood or was misinformed, stated that the commissions will be negotiable for the first time. That is not true. Commissions have always been negotiable. The media is really over-exaggerating, what a surprise, and what actually is going on with this lawsuit. So today we're going to look at all the facts together so that way you can see the truth plain and clear for yourself, draw your own conclusions, and then I'll also add my opinion to the pile of opinions that already exist out there. You're welcome. But it's an educated one, okay, with experience. So first of all, I do want to address the fact that NAR is not losing like a lot of people are saying out there. Settling and losing are not the same thing. Actually, settling is the complete opposite of losing. Basically, the court is not finding favor with either party, and now both parties have to negotiate on something, some accord to settle, to prevent from the case going on further and causing further damages and becoming more expensive. Now, all this information that I'm going to be sharing with you is information directly from the source. This is not from news articles or anything else. I got this information from listening to actual lawyers that are directly involved in some form or another, major or minor, and I read into a bit of the case myself. It is available online. Also, I did want to briefly mention that this week we got an email that as of currently, the settlement is actually undergoing preliminary approval. Preliminary means this. It has not been finally approved yet. The court still needs to actually approve it. I'll be discussing what the negotiations were within the offer for the settlement later in the video, so stay tuned for that. And that's basically what this whole thing is about. There's not really a complete basis into having the plaintiff win, and there's not really a complete basis to have the NAR win. And so to prevent further damages from happening, this is why they are choosing, let's just agree to something and just get done with this once and for all. This lawsuit is basically going on because there are some sellers out there who are upset that they not only have to pay commission to their agent, but to the buyer's agent as well. Now, that was standard practice. Typically, you'd see a 6% figure, 6% of whatever sales price of the home that was being split between the buyer and the seller's agents. So a commission of typically, again, you see 3 and 3%. Now, it really depends on the state you're in. It also depends on what kind of market. If you're selling luxury listings, that's going to be different. You typically see 2% each or maybe even less. Now, what I find ironic is how the sellers are taking issue with buyer agents making 3% off of the sales price. And this lawsuit going on, the lawyers involved are probably gaining around 30%, I believe so, of the final settlement, which is $418 million versus the 3%. You do the math. Also keep in mind that this lawsuit has been going on for years. So there's some confusion as to when exactly this all started. Different websites mention different things. But according to the source, this case was filed in 2021. And apparently it is also connected to a case from 2019, where the U.S. Department of Justice filed a statement of interest for this lawsuit, which, of course, insinuates that there was talk about this, of starting something before that. Now, of course, this is not the first time that the NAR gets sued, but the thing that sets this one apart and why it's blowing up in terms of all media is that it's a class action lawsuit. So it involves everyone, basically. So class action lawsuits, in theory, they're supposed to protect the consumer. But in this case, however, it's actually going to be doing the opposite. And I will explain further into that. I will be linking as much information as I possibly can in the description. So if you want to dig into it yourself, you're absolutely welcome to. Now, the part where it gets tricky and the part that also kind of does irritate me is how there isn't just one single standard that covers just a whole umbrella of everyone under the NAR. Although you do not necessarily have to be under the NAR to be a real estate agent, but to access the MLS, you have to be an NAR member, and that's what typically all real estate agents end up going to. But what frustrates me is the fact that it is not a single standard for all states. all states actually function differently, even though under the NAR umbrella, they each have their own Realtors Association. So, for example, I'm in Washington State, specifically in Spokane County. Besides from being under the NAR umbrella, I'm also under the SAR umbrella, which is Spokane Association of Realtors. Washington tends to be a little bit more progressive and a little bit more understanding of legalities. And so, because we've been seeing this kind of coming down in the pipeline, our association has already implemented certain laws for realtors, and there's not really much change, especially for us here in Washington. There's probably only one small detail that's going to be different that's not really that big of a deal. However, for other agents in different states, it's completely different from the norm that they're used to. Now, just like how I mentioned that all states function differently, our job here is a lot more intense than a few other states that I know of, and things that I've heard from other realtors as well. I think the reason why a lot of people hate realtors is because they think that A, because they had a terrible realtor experience, or B, they're just misinformed and think that realtors just make quick and easy money by opening doors, which again is not true, especially for us here in Washington. But in some states, who knows? I don't know the laws of every single other state. Or C, they just have heard of terrible experiences from other home buyers or home sellers dealing with unethical people. Now, let me be clear. Unethical people we can find anywhere. And I know I do not have as many decades of experience as some other people do, but just in my lifetime, I have already realized that the people who want to be unethical will always find a way to be unethical. And that being said, with the laws that go to be implemented to protect the consumers from unethical people, it ends up also harming the ethical people. No, it's not always fair, but it's just how the law functions, and the law can't always be perfect, but it is there to protect and serve the people. Basically, all the changes are dealing with the compensation and how the compensation is offered and taken care of. One of those main things is that realtors can no longer place their compensation amount on the MLS. It was standard in a lot of places actually for realtors to be able to see buyer agent commission rates and for the buyer agents to be able to filter to show houses that the seller was offering a higher buyer's commission to show up first. Obviously, this doesn't sound too fair, so I'm all about transparency, and I don't think that's very transparent because it is sort of like steering, which is something that is unethical according to the National Association of Realtor Standards. Now, another thing that's changing is that the compensation amount must be in writing and must be discussed with the clients before entering into a buyer agency agreement. It used to be that a lot of people would ask a realtor, hey, can you show me some properties? They would go around to a few properties and just look at houses for free and then decide whether they wanted to work with that agent or not, or maybe they were just doing it for fun and wouldn't end up working with the agent anyway. I would say don't do that, but now you can't even do that anyway. So now legally, you have to be under a buyer agency agreement to receive any of those services, including going to showings and looking at houses. Now, how that's going to affect open houses, that has not been stated yet. Again, this is the settlement offer. These are the terms that NAR said, hey, these are things we can do. Do you agree to settle on this or not? Whether it happens or not, we don't know yet until about mid-June, mid-July. Another thing that is changing is that the commission rate that the buyer agent puts that he or she wants to receive, it remains set. So it used to be where you could say, hey, I agree with receiving, let's say, a minimum of 2.5%. But let's just say that the seller's agent is willing to give 3%. It used to be allowed where you could take that extra 0.5%. Now that is no longer allowed. Whatever you agree to is set in stone, and that's it, which again is not a bad thing. I see it as only fair. Now, one of the biggest changes is that realtors that are working with buyers can no longer promote their services as free unless they are truly not accepting any kind of commission at all for helping their client. It became common practice over the years for realtors to mention their services as technically free because their commission was coming out of the seller's net. Now, it's not the seller's pocket directly. No, this is the sale of the house. I'm going to pull up right here what it looks like to build a seller net sheet. This is something that realtors use during a listing appointment to show what a seller can actually get from selling their home. It's important to mention that all these numbers are estimates, but realtors do use this in order to compete amongst themselves on who can be the best listing agent for this seller. So let's just enter in a random number here, and let's put the sales price at around 500 grand. Let's just keep that conventional. Let's do 90% with 10% down payment. The existing leftover loan that they're still paying off, their interest rate that they locked into. Now over here is where things can be negotiable. This is typically standard. All of these other things are also negotiable into the contract. Let's say the seller will be paying for the home warranty for the buyer. There could either be a flat fee, sales price, percentage of sales price, or percentage of the loan. Now, the important thing that I want you to look at is over here. If listing agents were to be competing against themselves and showing an estimated seller's net sheet, changing a few of these numbers to try to come up with the highest number here possible on the total estimated seller's net of what the seller will actually leave with at the end of the transaction, they could play around with some of these numbers. The biggest change in numbers that you could see is completely removing the buyer's agent compensation. So now a listing agent can print this out and show the seller, look, this is how much you can actually get for the sale of your home. Okay, this is not the first time that commissions are negotiable. They have always been negotiable. I mean, go take a contract from Auntie Sue who bought a house in 2001, I guess, and just look at the contract and see how it's written up. It's the actual purchase and sales agreement. You will see that there are ways to actually fill in the blanks whatever you choose to agree that the compensation should be worth. Now, of course, you might be thinking, okay, but you literally just mentioned that Washington State has already implemented a lot of these changes, and so obviously yours would be negotiable. Sure, that's great reasoning, but that's why I'm also saying go look at an old real estate contract, see for yourself. Everything within contracts, specifically the commissions, according to my knowledge, they have always been negotiable. I mean, that's the whole point of a real estate transaction is to negotiate the contract. So I'm going to show you Form 21, which is the typical residential purchase and sales agreement. And if you scroll down and you look closely, line number 17, buyer brokerage firm compensation. You can literally select whether it's a dollar amount or a percentage, and you could literally type in whatever you'd like. So this is something that's always been negotiable. Click on listing broker or buyer listing broker, limited dual agent, or unrepresented. Now, other than that, you also have Form 41C, which is specifically a form on the buyer brokerage firm compensation. So looking at it from the seller's perspective, you could see how it's actually kind of tempting to not have to pay for the buyer's agent. Why would you want to pay for a competing agent, which that agent is not even on your side? They're going to be fighting for their buyers to get the lowest price possible while you're trying to get the highest price possible. So you might be thinking, isn't that a good thing? Isn't this a good thing that the buyer's agent has to be paid by the buyer? So let's think about this for a second. Let's just say that you as a seller, you do not want to offer the buyer broker a compensation. Now that the laws are changing, realtors need to let their buyers know that they might have to pay them out of pocket depending on the house that they choose to see and depending on if that seller is offering to pay for the buyer's representative or not. Now, that's either going to make the buyer feel uncomfortable with even buying a house to begin with because they don't want to run that risk. Most first-time home buyers can hardly even afford to get into the market. Things are already really difficult now as is, but now with this change in the laws, it's going to make it that much more difficult for a first-time home buyer to even get into home ownership. But let's just say that they agree to take that risk and they hope that whatever house they decide to put an offer in, the seller will be willing to pay for their representative. But in the case that you as a seller are not, one of the possibilities of what that's going to do is it's going to deter buyers from wanting to see your property, which means you are now going to have your property sitting in the market for longer. And after a while of your property not selling and your agent telling you, hey, it's time to reduce the price again for the third time, you're probably going to feel inclined to, hey, I'm going to fire this agent and I'm going to get a different listing agent because this person clearly can't sell my house. The problem is not with the listing agent. The problem is with the marketing. By not offering the buyer's broker's commission, now not only are the buyer brokers not wanting to see your property, but also their clients, the buyers, don't want to be going to see your property either because they're going to have to pay their representative out of their own pocket. For the buyers that do end up proceeding to buy a house without a representative, that's going to be extremely difficult for them to navigate the whole transaction and extremely stressful. The home buying process is already stressful as is, but having to navigate things yourself and not understanding the complexities of everything that goes into home buying, who knows what kinds of issues they're going to run into because as a matter of fact, you almost always run into issues when you're dealing with a real estate transaction. Things are so complex and there's so many legalities and everything, how all things are interconnected and involved. And there are so many things that you can miss because contracts are huge. If you actually print them out, it's like a whole stack. You're not going to really want to look into all of that. You're not familiar with all the language. And even if you are, if you haven't had the experience from a previous transaction, you're not going to really see certain things that realtors are there to point out. Now, again, I'm saying that with an umbrella term as if all realtors would point that out. No, not all of them would. And I understand that there are plenty of people that are unethical or that just don't care. And frankly, I'm sorry because that's not the way it should be. The reason why the National Association of Realtors even exists is to create a code of ethics that you have to follow. Yes, there is the typical laws, but there are people who find loopholes within the law systems and then they're not held accountable. So then when you put people under a national association of realtors, which is a bigger umbrella, and now they have also their association of realtors, that whatever county or state that they're in, it kind of narrows down the responsibility. So that way people can be held accountable for their actions. Whether it's true or not that people are always held accountable to their actions is debatable. I'm sure there are plenty of people that slide by because we deal with a lot of those people face to face on our transaction on a daily basis. And we really wonder, are they going to have their license revoked? Because they really should. So I understand the frustration coming from the sellers that have to deal with something like this. But at the same time, going this far is only going to damage the economy. They're not looking at the bigger picture. So as you can see, this updated law isn't helpful to the buyer because it's not going to lower the home prices. The compensation does not affect the home prices at all. What it does is it affects the seller's net. The main two things that do affect home prices are the comparative market analysis and the appraisal value. And that's not changing anytime soon. So instead, this law, instead of making it better for consumers, in my opinion, it's actually making it worse, which in fact will damage the economy because first-time homebuyers are vital for the market to flourish, for the economy to do well. If you do not have first-time homebuyers coming in, what you're doing is essentially trading assets between homeowners. And that's not really going to benefit anything in the end. It's just going to keep things stagnant and it's not going to be flowing the proper way that it should. But regardless on whether these changes are a good idea or not, it's inevitable, they're happening, they're here. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, this can go multiple ways. Either we will witness a pendulum swing happening in the market where now most buyers are going to have to pay for their own representative because a lot of sellers are pissed from dealing with previous representatives that were misusing and dishonoring the realtor name. And because of the way the market's going to suffer with that and the repercussions that are going to happen, then people will realize how vital it is to have first-time homebuyers enter the market and how we actually need to facilitate them coming into the market, not make it harder for them and keep them out. Or it could be that not really much is going to change because a lot of sellers maybe are level-headed and are going to think, well, it was really difficult when we first got into the market, but you just got to get in to actually make it. It could be that some of the sellers will realize how it will also affect the sale of their home if they don't actually advertise it properly and open their doors to these people instead of limiting to a very narrow audience, keeping their competition low and not getting as much of value from the home as they would like. So it could be that things continue normally the way they have, which in our market in Washington, that's basically what's been happening. We haven't really seen a lot of sellers deny paying a buyer's broker's compensation. But again, it's because it also wasn't publicized as heavily as it is now with everything that the media is saying and how listing agents might actually be advertising themselves from now on. It could be that we might see that pendulum swing of a lot more sellers not wanting to pay for the buyer's broker. And as to how all this will be affecting realtors or just real estate agents that are not realtors, it really all just depends on what brokerage they are under. All NAR members and brokerages that have a transactional volume of $2 billion or less in the year 2022, they're covered by the settlement. Anyone else outside of that, there are certain actions that they have to take and potentially even surplus they'll have to pay. There's different appendixes that kind of refer to each one of those categories. All these things are not certain yet because this has not been fully approved. It says here that there is a request of a hearing on final approval of the settlement to be held November 26th of 2024. So as of now, things aren't going to be fully taken effect, but we will be seeing it towards the end of this year. And as to how the market is currently going on right now, we're really hoping to see some positive changes towards opening up more doors for new homebuyers to get into the market, despite all these other changes that have only made things worse. I also understand that there's a lot of realtors out there that are really frustrated that it seems as if the NAR isn't really trying to win this case or hasn't done enough to support realtors. And in a sense, I understand that because the only thing that we really get, or most of us even utilize from the NAR, is the MLS. But just to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt and play some advocacy here, we also do not know the ins and outs of everything. We're not part of the board. We're not actually hearing from them exactly why they had to do a settlement instead of escalating. Of course, to the best of my knowledge, it's just that there wasn't enough tangible evidence on either side to pin one as guilty and one as not. Because at the end of the day, realtors are absolutely vital in transactions. But unfortunately, there are also realtors who have stained the realtor name. And that is why we are seeing these lawsuits take effect. I'm hoping that what can come out of this is that the NAR and all of their subcategories of the NAR can do a better job at holding realtors accountable to their actions especially realtors who are doing things unethically. Because as much as you hate dealing with them, so do we. We realtors have to deal with the unethical realtors firsthand more than actually you do, because we are here to represent you, make sure there's a barrier between you and the other side. So I wouldn't necessarily hate on the NAR. There's been a lot that's been going on with NAR lately. I don't think they necessarily deserve praise, but they also don't deserve as much flack as people are giving them. All that being said, I really hope that this did educate you some more into this topic, that my side of the coin, my opinion on this matter made sense to you, and that also you understood things for yourself. I hope I did a good enough job at breaking things down to make it manageable for you to understand. Well, that's it. So thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next one.